Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to see all of your friendly faces, or at least the top halves of them. Many of you know me, I'm Eva Lucchini, and I started working at a wonderful organization called Lutheran Community Services Northwest. And that is a nonprofit that has offices and does great work in Oregon and Washington and in Idaho. And one of the things that we're most well known for is our refugee resettlement work. And that work is very important right now. And I know all of you are very worried about the people in Afghanistan, the people that we're hoping can come to this country as refugees and be resettled. Well, Lutheran Community Services, that's what we do, and that's what we do here in the Pacific Northwest. So I am very excited and happy and glad to share with you a wonderful speaker, my boss, Salah Ansary, and he's from Afghanistan. He's the district director of Lutheran Community Services District in this area. We call it our Multicultural Services District. And he came here to the United States from Afghanistan in 1978. And he's been through this experience that we're hoping people will be able to get to come here. The pain, the suffering, the hardship, he understands it personally. He came here and he got his education and he got his master's degree. And then he started doing this sort of work at Lutheran Community Services, and he's been doing it for over, I think, 37 years. Yeah. So he's the expert and the man of the hour, and I'm really glad that he came here to talk to all of you today. So please, Salah, come up and share with us your knowledge and experience.
Thank you, Pastor Jean. Thank you, Eva. Must have been about 10, 15 years ago that I came to beautiful Savior and shared a meal together. And that was when we were asking the church support again for the population that we work with. And of course, today I was quite touched and moved by some of the hymns that folks read here, because my emotions are quite raw. Be still, my soul, your God will undertake to guide the future as he has the past. For me, as Eva mentioned, I was uprooted from Afghanistan in 1975. And then in 1979, my entire family was relocated and came to the US. And I was the one that resettled them in Portland. And at that time, obviously, in 1979, as you all know, it was the height of the Cold War. And the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan destroyed and devastated a life that we knew, that it was a society that was working, it was functional, where I went to school. 1964, the Constitution at the time provided equal opportunity, equal rights for women, and the wearing of a hijab was something optional. And college education were co-ed, and many things that we sometimes take it granted here, but unfortunately those things were taken away from us. And since 1975, that country has been in turmoil. Obviously, during the Cold War, we were, as our government and policies, we were involved in many of those situations. Obviously, we provided support to assist the freedom fighters to fight the Russians. Then in 1988, Soviet Union withdrew from Afghanistan, but the country was left in a total mess. And of course, the Afghans themselves obviously tried to score their differences amongst themselves. And then a brutal regime came into power that's called the Taliban. And Talib means student. And Taliban is the word for students. And these individuals heavily trained in some of the madrasas in Pakistan, who is still supporting these elements. And boy, the atrocities that they committed in 5-6 years that they were in power, it's beyond what you can believe. And I'm sure you may have heard it at the time. They didn't leave anything untouched. Women were sent back homes. Educations were destroyed. Schools were destroyed. No music. Even they went to destroy some of Afghanistan's monumental treasures that from centuries ago, those were the Buddha statues, the highest in the world, actually. They bombed and took the genital part of those Buddha statues. And the list goes on and on. So now that they are in power, obviously, people are totally scared. Well, first of all, right now, the past week, the swift movement of these elements that took over is just mind-boggling how quickly they took over the capital. And for a week now, it's almost a week today, that there's no government, nothing is functioning, and total chaos. And of course, many people are trying to get out. I'm sure you have seen some of the pictures. And last night, I get calls in the middle of the night, people that know me, people that have stranded back now. Some of them have worked with the US Army in Afghanistan. This mother called me like 4 o'clock in the morning because of the time difference. Said, my son worked with the US and can you do something? Can you help me out? There was this other family that called me, family of 8, no male members in the family, all women. And they are locked down at home. They said if they come in, they are searching house by house now. And we are in need of help. How can you support us? How can you get us out? Obviously, I can't do all of this stuff. But again, the refugee resettlement process is a lengthy one. Obviously, there are some that are being moved out, but the processing will take a while if they are lucky enough to make it here. But Lutheran Community Services, obviously, it was a calling for me when I left the country and came in 1978, and then subsequently in the early 80s. I learned about a refugee program at Lutheran Community Services Northwest. And I came to work for this agency. And by now, we must have resettled more than 45,000 refugees in the Northwest. It's just not Afghans, obviously, small percentage of Afghans that we resettled. But we have worked at least 30, 40 different countries that we have refugees from those countries. And of course, the human, in God's kingdom, there are those individuals that extend their love and work and welcome a neighbor when they are hungry and destitute. But also in God's kingdom, there are some that do not hesitate to inflict pain to another individual human being. So, but these 45,000, just like this is my adopted home, have made the United States of America their home, and they need help at the beginning. Obviously, they need a hand to take care of themselves early on, but they move on. In all these years that I have worked, people, there's a lot of success stories in their lives where when you ask them when they come back, because they remember you, that you took their hand and helped them out those early days. When you ask them, obviously they say, well, my son graduated from this school or went to university, and there's so many heartwarming stories that I hear. And I have two lovely daughters, and both have finished their education graduate program, and they work in contributing to the society. And it's the same for many, many other refugees. Life is hard for the first generation because their children have been deprived of education, but once they arrive, obviously, and given the opportunity, they flourish. And people like yourselves, I don't know how much I can say about that, but the generosity of heart and people that have been assisted over the years, we cannot do this work alone. These 45,000 individuals that have resettled in the Northwest, the churches, individuals that have reached out and welcomed them to their midst. So I'm here today to say that thank you for your work and doing God's work and helping these individuals. Of course, the situation in the southern border, and a lot of the unaccompanied minor refugees, situation in Haiti, as the pastor mentioned, all of these areas that needs our attention right now. When we will have an Afghan family in Vancouver, I don't know, but it's possible that we will be resettling some after they are done with their paperwork and whatnot. So thank you again. Thank you. It's glad to be back with you. I don't know, I lost track of time, but I know Sonia from years back that we shared a meal here together. It was wonderful. And it was just today, just being with you and these times just touched my heart deeply. And please keep us in your prayers. Things are incredibly heart-wrenching. Some of these stories that I personally have knowledge of and desperate to get out. But unfortunately, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. So thank you again. And I can answer any questions that you may have if we have time. Please do so.
In our Tacoma office. So we're still hoping to get, we'll see what happens when refugees start coming towards Portland and Vancouver. But I would love it, Salah, if you would share some of those stories that you know from people that are in country right now and what they're experiencing.
As I mentioned, there's this family of 8 individuals, a mother and 7 daughters. The oldest daughter is 35 years old. And they said that some of the Taliban came in the neighborhood. They are right now rounding people up from some of the houses and search the houses. And they are scared because they're all women. Their treatment of women is incredibly, I, I just cannot say the words, but that they are afraid. They are afraid of, all kinds of violence and fear for their lives. There's an individual that came to my office. Their paperwork was in the process, but he has left 8 children back in Afghanistan, and this thing happened. The embassy is now closed, doesn't know how to get his children because his wife is deceased, and he left the children with some relatives. So those are the kind of stories that I hear from folks. And I try to submit their papers, whatever I can. But again, it's a lengthy process before. And the evacuation right now to some of the, some refugees that made it to Fort Lee in Virginia, some in they are also contemplating opening some reception center with Fort McCoy in Wisconsin and Fort Bliss in Texas. But these are the sites that they will then process Afghan refugees from right now. So, yes?
Could you clarify a lengthy process? Is that 6 months or 6 years?
Well, these individuals, if they are processed in country, in the United States, probably will take 3 months, maybe. But again, they have to do all kinds of security vetting and whatnot, and that's number one. So there's several U.S. government entities that are involved. There's Department of State, Homeland Security, HHS, Health and Human Services, and then obviously the voluntary agencies that resettle refugees, and the paperwork. And then the burden of proof is on them to really say why their life was in danger. Sometimes country condition is not going to help you. You need to demonstrate that your life was in danger. And that in itself, people, when you run for your life, you don't gather documents. It's hard to do that, especially now what had happened. Yes?
Besides offering prayers or financial support, what are some other things that we could do to help?
I think the use of your pen and advocating and asking our elected officials questions as to what's happening, I think that's very effective and powerful because you are the constituents of those individuals that are making some of the policies and can ask the administration. This was incredibly a botched kind of evacuation plan that took place. It's unfortunate, but it happened. I was 3 weeks ago in Washington, D.C., in a rally that I participated with some of the other providers and veterans, that they were afraid that this evacuation, even at that time, Taliban was not even close to the capital, was asking this something, it has to be an orderly plan. But of course, you can't have an orderly plan. It's quite, but again, it just reminds us, I don't know if some of you may have remembered the fall of Saigon, which we have resettled refugees. After the fall of Saigon, for the next 15 years, this agency was still working with refugees from Southeast Asia. And how those last few days of evacuation took place. This what we saw here was even worse. Yes?
I was going to ask, once you get a refugee family, where do you put them?
That's a very good question. Thank you. Securing housing is incredibly hard, and especially the cost of housing is. But we have been able to do it. Do it with support and finding resources. with some of these cases, especially when we get a notice of an arrival, because they are being moved in country, for example, from Fort Lee or any other places in the United States, it takes only 2 days. So we get a notice and we have to turn around and assure that, yes, we will accept this case, but then you have to frantically look for housing. And that's one of the challenges. So if people can help, that's an area that we need help. Not only financial resources, but also advocating, because sometimes landlords, because they want all kinds of documentation about, credit history and whatnot. These individuals don't have credit history and whatnot. So it's difficult, but we have been able to do it. It's not, but it's hard. Yes.
Salah, would you also share what other things that Lutheran Community Services does with finding housing when we've got an arrival?
Securing housing is obviously number one, but household items and furnitures and getting a family, furnish an apartment itself. And then they have numerous appointments. You have to get them to their health screening. You have to get them to ESL and employment services, and just orientation, cultural orientation that we do. Those are the kind of initial services that we provide. Obviously, we have at Lutheran Community Services Northwest, we're fortunate to have a lot of wraparound services, and especially behavioral health services. That's very much needed. I was looking at the program, you talk about trauma. These individuals have been incredibly traumatized, and we have experience with refugees. Obviously, the journey of displacement is such that's quite traumatic experience. And so we try to connect them with all the services that we have within our agency, but also what's available outside the agency. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Oh,
Salah.
thank you. Thank you so much. Sure, please.